Welcome to the Plant-Based Podcast. Did you know that plants are truly amazing? Not only can you grow them and eat them, you can also wear them, drink them, nourish your skin with them, and so much more. Let Ellen and Michael inspire you to love plants as much as they do, as they chat with the movers and shakers in this wonderful plant-based world. So, let's dig in.
The tranquil, soothing, natural sound of flowing water. Listening to it has been shown to lower your heart rate and blood pressure and generally relax your whole body. Combining the magical sound of cascading water with the beauty of plants, Hydria Life will now enable you to use those same health and well-being effects at home or in the garden. Get 10% off their rechargeable Hydria fountain at hydrialife.com. All you need to do is quote the code PLANT24 when ordering. Hey guys, so what exactly is biosecurity and why should it matter to us? Today we're talking to Dario Spagnoli from the RHS. He's the show's biosecurity specialist, and we're looking forward to learning more about how we can safeguard our gardens and the UK from invasive plants, why sneaking back cuttings in your suitcase might not be the best idea of a souvenir, and many other important subjects about safeguarding our horticultural landscape. So welcome to the podcast, Dario.
Hello, both of you. How are you?
Hi, Dario. We're good, thank you very much.
Good.
We always like to ask our guests a little bit about their background. So we'd love to know, were you always interested in plants, when you were growing up? Has gardening, what you do been part of life for you, or is it a more recent thing?
Well, it's quite a long story. Hopefully I won't go on for too long, but my background is creative, is the creative industry. So I actually have a degree in interior design. And I worked in the world of luxury interiors for about 4 years or so, and wasn't really enjoying it as much as I thought I would. And at the time, a friend of mine had a gardening business in Hertfordshire, and I was at a bit of a loose end. And he said, well, why don't you come and do a bit of gardening work for me? And I thought, okay, I will give it my best and see what happens. And I did. And I guess the rest is history really from that point. But I was surprised at how much I enjoyed gardening. But to be honest, I shouldn't have been that surprised because my family, both from my mum and my dad's side, is a farming background. So I suppose plants are in the DNA, really. And as a kid, I grew up in southeast London, and we were fortunate enough to have a garden. And apparently I was known for singing to my sunflowers when I was a kid, because that's what I was told to make them grow.
I love that. That's so cute.
So I guess that means I had a fondness for plants, from a very young age. But also there was always conversations between my mum, my aunts, and family, on both sides, Italian and English, and a big focus around food. And so there's all various things really which kind of make sense. And I didn't really think about it till I was, really in the industry. And I thought, okay, well, that does make sense, because I always used to love my nan's garden. On the Isle of Wight. It was full of roses. And I have this really, really, clear memory of like pinks and peaches and yellows, of like, big hybrid tea roses with a really kind of classic sort of English rose sort of scent. And it's just weird how that's been imprinted on me from that age. I was young at that point, probably under 10. And it just kind of all makes sense, really. And, you know, my aunt, she was a head gardener for a garden estate on the Isle of Wight. Two of my cousins both worked for a guy called Stephen Woodham, who's a garden designer, and I think he's a judge, an RHS judge as well. And they created gardens at Chelsea. So there's like this whole long history, which has obviously just been somehow imprinted in my brain as a child. So I guess it makes sense, really. But yeah.
Oh, very nice.
Honestly, just another guest, Michael, who says it goes back to childhood. So it doesn't even matter if many of our guests haven't worked in horticulture like their whole careers, but almost everyone says they have fond memories of gardening as a child. So it's quite incredible, really.
Yeah, it's amazing, really.
Yeah, so tell us how you then, when did you join the RHS? Because when I first met you, I think you were working on the London shows at that point. What roles did you then do in the RHS until you got to the role that you're doing today?
So I joined the RHS in 2007. I have to remember this. I think I've been here for 7 years now, or just almost 7 years. Yes, I joined as part of the London shows team. So I was the deputy show manager at that point. And we were doing, you know, the shows in the horticultural halls, as you know, which is really exciting. Lots of interesting content and, you know, developing sort of stories around, I guess, urban horticulture. And then myself and my manager, Graham, at the time, we ended up having to close those shows. They weren't effectively making enough money, so they were brought to a close. And then at that point, the options were left open to us as to kind of where we wanted to go within the RHS. And at that point in time, our new garden Bridgewater was in development. And so the main sort of elements of the landscaping and, I mean, the really sort of like hard engineering of the landscape had sort of been done. And they were focusing on the planting and the soft landscaping and working with Tom Stewart Smith and things like that. So they were looking for somebody to take on the role of plant procurement, effectively, to source all of the plants for the garden for opening. And that was my role for 2 years, which was incredible. I absolutely loved it. And part of that job, and it's funny, it's kind of like how it's interesting somehow to think how your experience over the years builds up to a certain point and a direction for you. Because I'd worked on nurseries, I've worked with designers, I've done a lot of plant buying, I've done a lot of plant sales. Key to all of that work is plant health, pests and diseases, quality of plant material. And so it all fed into this one project at Bridgewater, really. And then I was able to put it all to use. And then at the end of that 2 years, I was thinking about what my direction should be from there. And in the plant health team, there was a role which was coming up, and it was all about developing the procurement contracts for the RHS around buying plants and how to do it in the most sort of safe way to make sure we didn't bring in new pests and diseases to the gardens. So then I went into that. That was a temporary role. That was for 12 months. So I move around quite a bit, and then I went into work back on shows as the floral marquee manager for a year. That was, and then that role didn't quite work for me, only because, and it's a fantastic team and, you know, an incredible sort of area to work in, but I was missing this element of plant science, which I'd kind of suddenly developed a real interest and a real passion for, because it's learning for me. Learning in horticulture, I just love it all the time. You're always learning.
Yeah, that's cool.
And it was a whole new area, and I was just like, and I just kept thinking about this project, which I kind of left halfway through, and I couldn't stop thinking about this project. And I then found out that a role was coming up back within the biosecurity team in plant health, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go back, which is what I did. And then that's where I am today, basically.
And that's
where you are today.
That's where I am today. Right now.
Was that then a brand new role in that case? Because like, obviously the landscape had changed in terms of, you know, climate, imports, Brexit. Was that a completely new role, or had it existed before?
No, it had existed before, but a relatively new and a relatively young role, really, because I think there's always been a core plant health team in the RHS, but working on shows and thinking about the biosecurity side of things. The biosecurity team is a relatively young team. It's not been around for that long.
Okay.
But it slowly evolved from a plant health perspective to, as you say, like the biosecurity perspective, covering all of the stuff around legislation, things around import, export, all that sort of stuff. So it has sort of developed over the years, yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Can you, so we know where you've been and what you've done, but can you talk us through kind of the basic elements of the role that you're in now? What do you do as in biosecurity?
Lots of different things. I'm going to try and break it down into the most basic. I suppose the key elements, or how does my year look? Is probably the best way to do it. So I'll start from the end of the show season, and this is kind of the most understandable route through, I suppose. So let's say we're at the end of the show season. That's sort of like the autumn, October, November, and I would then start looking at our biosecurity policy for shows and regulations from that year. If anything had changed across the year, so a new pest had arrived or a new pathogen suddenly had become more of a concern, I'd be looking at our regulations and seeing, do we need to improve here? Do we need to make things a bit tighter here? To kind of restrict things a bit more. So I do a review of that. And then that information that gets sent out to all of the show teams, it gets reviewed. And then really the process then starts from the perspective of the show teams, because they're getting all of the new garden submissions in. I'm sort of like there advising a bit on, make sure that if somebody's presenting a plant list, if they have this, make sure it's of, this source and stuff like that. And then a lot of training, and I do a lot of training, and that's staff, and that's exhibitors, that's volunteers, all the way across the RHS, really across the board. And I do training for about, 4 months. I mean, I don't know how many training sessions I've done this year, but I've done a lot. And I give talks as well. We have a Hilltop live talks area for education purposes. And then we move into the show season. And at that point, I'm doing risk assessing. I'm looking at all the plant lists. I'm speaking to exhibitors about any issues they may have. I'm advising. And then we get into the show season, and I'm there on site with a colleague. We're doing our plant health inspections, doing reports. I mean, that's a sort of rhythm to it. There's obviously other layers, but that's the rhythm, really. Okay. If that makes sense.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of different avenues that we want to go down today. I think one of the first ones, when people think of, biosecure, they obviously think pest and disease. And of course, that has maybe changed in the last 10, 15 years as well. Is there newer pest and diseases that we are dealing with now that weren't there previously, for example?
I mean, if we look back historically, so the sort of turning point is the noughties. So because the level of imports of plant material started to escalate or increase, really, through consumer demand, people getting more interested in gardening and different aspects of gardening, that's when we sort of started to see a bit of a curve go up, because there's more coming in. And obviously, the more stuff you bring in, the more chances there are of something appearing. That's not to say that all plants coming into the UK or any country are going to have problems, but you've got to be a bit more aware of what those problems might be. And so that's what we've sort of seen since then. I guess, I mean, if we think about, I mean, I don't like to bang on about Xylella all the time, but I do. I do a lot of talk about Xylella. That really is the most significant introduction we've had in Europe, in the past decade.
Before you go there, tell us, I hope you're going to tell us exactly what that is, because a lot of listeners may not even know. What is Xylella?
Right, okay. Xylella is a bacterial disease, and it's been around for a very, very long time. So it originates really from the South Americas. It's been causing problems in crops, I think, for nearly 100 years, really. And it's known in different parts of the world, but, there's a particular disease called Pierce's disease, which affects grapevines, causes leaves to go to scorch, can cause plants to die, causes crop failures. But fundamentally, it's a bacterial disease which, as its name suggests, Xylella, affects the xylem. So it affects the flow of water and sugars through the plants, which then causes things like death of a limb of a plant, and eventually blocking these vessels just causes the whole plant really to die and decline. That's a very sort of quick overview of the bacterial disease. It's spread via an insect vector. And in this case, in Europe, it is, and across the world, it's spittlebugs or insects of that family. And the bacterium, if it's ingested, it stays in the guts. And when they feed on the xylem, they effectively regurgitate. And as they regurgitate, they are pushing that bacteria into the plant, and off it goes, wreaking havoc, effectively.
Okay, that is an amazing explanation, because obviously I hear of it all of the time. I know that it's, a disease, but I didn't know all of the ins and outs of it. So thank you for that. I think that's really, really useful. Are there plants that are more susceptible to it that you have to look out for?
There are. So we have, there's a lot. There's a hell of a lot of plants. So the host range for this particular bacterial disease just keeps increasing year on year. I think at the moment we're over 600 genera. So that's a lot. It's a lot of plants. If we think about the highest risk hosts, which is what we primarily think about here in the UK, we've got olive, we've got oleander, Polygala myrtifolia, probably one that's quite familiar to people. You may see it in your local garden centre at certain times of the year. Spanish broom, coffee, almond, sweet almond. Have I missed one off? Rosemary, lavender. But these are the plants which are considered to be the highest risk hosts. So they're the most, I suppose, they're the most risky in terms of arriving in the UK in terms of an import. This is all really based on a lot of different factors, and there was a lot of research done into what plants would be put onto this high-risk host list by the government. I don't know the full ins and outs of the reasons why certain plants were chosen, but there is evidence around whether the plant's been found with that particular problem either on a nursery in a particular country. Maybe it's been found in the wild, or maybe they've looked at the way it has reacted through inoculation. So there's various factors involved in that, but that's why those plants are particularly up there on the high risk host list.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Go on, carry on. Yeah, carry on.
Oh no, I don't know what else. I was just about to ramble on about something. So just say what you want to hear, because I just we'll keep talking and talking and talking. It will get completely off subject. So.
That's fine. We don't mind. You can carry on.
All amazing information, honestly. Yeah.
It's really interesting. I was going to ask kind of slightly different, but obviously still to do with biosecurity, and that, things are changing. So obviously, there's more perhaps pests and diseases that can potentially be imported into our country. And I know we're going to talk about whether the changing climate has impacted that in a moment. Yeah. But before that, I also wondered if Brexit had changed biosecurity at all, because I see like plant passports on plants and things like that. Does that mean we import less plants? Has that affected anything? Is it for the better or the worse? Like, any insight into that would be great.
Yeah, it's a difficult one in some ways, because you hear lots of different stories, and you have to try and filter out the sort of the emotional reaction versus the fact of what the situation is. If we look at Brexit, yes, it has changed in terms of we have tighter controls to a certain extent now than what we did before. So what we are effectively doing, or what we're trying to do here, is move from an open system, which is, how would you describe that? A very easy way of moving things in and out, to more of a closed system, which is probably more similar to what you'd have in Australia, New Zealand, or Canada, for example. And so we always had the EU plant passport system. And so that was always a traceability scheme. It allows you to trace back through the supply chain where that plant came from if there was a problem or something was causing concern. Now, when we moved into our post-Brexit period, we moved to UK plant passport. So UK plant passports are effectively the same as an EU plant passport, but they have traceability primarily focused on the UK. The difference is that we have introduced some additional bits and pieces into our legislation. We very much we still have this, I don't know how you describe this hybrid of EU and UK legislation. It's still quite joined up in some ways because we worked very closely with the EU in developing, information and particular requirements around biosecurity. But we have something called additional declarations, which basically means that certain plants, and we'll talk about Xylella again, I suppose, certain plants need to be grown under certain conditions to ensure that they have minimized the absolute risk of Xylella as much as possible. And so because we have the requirement now to have phytosanitary certificate, which we didn't previously, except if the plant material was coming in from outside of the EU, or we refer to it as rest of world, basically. But so basically, it means that when that phytosanitary certificate is signed off and sent with the export, whoever it is in that country, the National Plant Protection Officer will have had to make sure that the plants leaving have met the requirements that we have asked for, which are set in our legislation. It's a pretty complicated way of describing basically somebody meeting something, ticking it off, it's been checked, and then sending it over so it meets the UK requirement. And that is a post-Brexit change, as one example. And we've also got the additional inspections which we have, which we introduced in April at the ports. So there's additional changes which are happening, but as I say, I think the move is towards a more closed system. So we're trying to avoid allowing anything in at all before it gets in, to an inland area. So we're trying to keep it right at the boundary so we can get it straight away before it gets in.
For the good of, pest, disease, obviously invasive plants as well. This is all, it might sound like a lot of admin, but it's very important, isn't it?
It's a lot of admin. It's a lot of admin.
So we want to just touch on invasive plants briefly because the list of invasive plants keeps growing. What is actually the definition of an invasive plant? And is there kind of like advice that you could give listeners at home as to what to look out for, what to do if they come across an invasive plant, for example?
Invasive plants are a very complicated area, purely because there's different circumstances for a lot of them. There's also the key plants which are, banned from sale, banned from planting in the wild. An invasive plant is, I guess, really, when we talk about invasive organisms and a plant is an organism, we're talking about anything that is moved outside of its natural or native range and has the potential to basically cause harm or damage through population in the area, region, or country it's moved to. And so, let's talk about some really good examples. Japanese knotweed. I mean, we've all heard of Japanese knotweed, I'm sure.
Most famous.
The most famous one, the Victorians loved bringing in lovely, unusual, invasive species. They didn't know that at the time. But, they establish, and because they don't have the natural predators which would exist in their natural habitat, or the climate is different, you end up with plants which cause problems, blocking waterways or effectively, growing out of our own native flora. That sort of briefly describes, when we talk about invasive plants, is what we're really talking about. What was the other question, Michael?
Well, how should people be worried about it at home, and what can they do if they do come across an invasive plant, or have one in their garden already? Because obviously, extra ones being added to the list. It's not just Japanese knotweed anymore, is it necessarily? Which was always the poster boy for invasive plants.
It is the poster boy for invasive plants. I mean, there is plenty of them. I mean, Himalayan balsam, for example. That's one which is on the hit list. I think that's quite a recognisable one. It's part of the Impatiens genus. You would probably notice that the flower's quite similar. It's like a smaller version of a busy lizzie, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, if you are to find these in your garden, there's different things you need to do. Really, you should be removing them. Depending on, without getting too complicated around the whole law system, but you need to make sure that you aren't breaking the law in various ways. Sometimes removing the plant and then transporting it to get destroyed can actually be breaking the law. If you don't. Oh, hello.
I've just muted Michael. I think he's doing something that's making a bit of noise. The sound just rustled around, so I've muted Michael. Hang on, I'll ask you to unmute again. Sorry, Michael. You'll have to unmute Michael. There we go.
Is he back?
Yeah.
He's back. He was desperately looking for an invasive species, maybe in his house.
Yeah, seeing what was throwing out of the keyboard keys or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you find something which is listed as one of the more concerning invasive species, you need to report it. There is different sort of rules and regulations around how you manage it on your land. If it's on your land, you are meant to not encourage it to grow. Ideally, you're meant to remove it. But there are certain ways to do that, and there are certain ways to move it to the point of destruction. I always say, I mean, this is my sort of rule around it, and I've done this myself, and I've been out walking. I love walking out in nature and going to forests and woodland and countryside. If I see something which I know is of concern, I will normally report it to let's say the land trust looking after that particular land. If it's National Trust, more than likely, 99% of the time, they know about it already.
Yeah.
And they're either doing whatever they need to do. It's all about legal compliance. I mean, that's generally the approach. If it's in your garden, I would generally recommend for people with private gardens to do a quick search, and you can go to the non-native species secretariat, very catchy name, or the NNSS, and you could type in the plant that you think you have, and they will give you all the information you need to manage it.
That's excellent. Thank you. Actually, I was doing hosting a talk at a show earlier on in the year, and someone in the audience was telling us about what they've got growing in their garden, and it was very clearly Japanese knotweed. we were like, yeah, you really don't want to be shouting about that, right? You're never going to sell that house now.
No, are you going to sell that house ever? No. The cost alone. That's the one thing that we don't talk about with all of these things like biosecurity and invasive plants. The cost can be astronomical. Like it runs into the thousands. And for managing things like ash dieback or Dutch elm disease, for example, we're talking almost hundreds of millions of pounds.
Yeah.
So we don't think about that, but it's a real financial drain.
Yeah.
I think something just before we move on, you did mention it briefly, but I just want to make it really clear to listeners who, if they do find an invasive plant on their land, who do they call? Like, who are they ringing up when you say report it? Who are they reporting it to? The police?
I would know. I mean, look, if they're out to get their neighbour, by all means, they probably will. But you've got to be very sure that you found something that is invasive. And as I mentioned, there's varying degrees of this because we have very popular plants, well, they have been very popular over the years, such as, let's say, for example, cherry laurel, which in parts of the UK is invasive. It goes into woodland and forests and it causes problems. Rhododendron ponticum, another problem plant. Some of these are not under legislation. They're not managed under any sort of law. And so when you are looking for the particular plant, you need to really maybe have a quick Google. But as I mentioned, the non-native species secretariat, they tend to cover quite broadly things which are a problem in terms of legal compliance, and then things which maybe, I guess how you could describe it as more thuggish, or they're on a monitoring list. Okay. So they are probably they're a good source and a good place to go to.
Okay. Got you. So now everyone at home is going to be out on walks, looking at all the plants in the garden, checking around, making sure that it's not going to cost them thousands and thousands to be removed. We don't mean to scare our listeners, but also, it is something that people really need to be aware of. Dario, I have a question about the changing climate. I know I mentioned it earlier on, but is that having an effect on biosecurity and changes in pests and diseases that we're seeing in this country at all?
It is, and it will continue to, and it will probably. I don't like to use the word get. I don't like to say get worse, but it will become. You'll probably see more significant outbreaks of problems. Mm-hmm. I mean, we really just need to think about the fact that, we've just had an incredibly mild winter here. I mean, it's been very mild, it's been very wet, and it's been quite warm at times, unseasonably warm, even though our summer is a bit rubbish, but anyway. Mm-hmm. But the overall sort of view is that it's been warmer and milder and wetter than usual. And, there are particular pathogens out there. There's a pathogen, Phytophthora ramorum. I'm sure you've heard of this before, or Conoviae. And both of these are what we call notifiable diseases, and they can cause really significant problems to woody plants and trees. They cause decline, they cause bleeding in the tree. If the tree is stressed already, it could lead, effectively be fatal. Because it's been so wet, and this particular pathogen is what we call a water mold or an oomycete, it basically travels either through water in the ground or being more noticeable. There's been more occurrences, and this is purely due to a climatic change, really. It's there, it's knocking around, but you need that. What's the word? You need something to keep it kind of going and to effectively suddenly become more of a problem.
It's like hosting it.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got plants which are, trees and plants which are a particular host of this particular disease. But the more sort of extreme weather you see, the more you see plants stressed, drought. We go through these extremes of wet, absolute severe drought, and trees, they can't cope with it. They end up being stressed themselves, and that leaves them more vulnerable to all sorts. So climate is definitely a factor, and it will continue to be. Unfortunately,
it's not just more slugs and snails in the garden. There's more than that.
Yeah, there is a lot of slugs and snails this year. There is.
Oh, there really are.
There really are. They're out in force this year, and they're eating a lot of things. But they're obviously having a great time.
Oh yeah, they are. They love my allotment right now.
They're out in force, definitely.
So this is such amazingly useful information for listeners. It really is. And you explain it in a really good, straightforward way. But I'm going to ask you a question that we kind of asked already in a roundabout way, but I'm going to ask it in a real kind of day-to-day way. And I've been on holiday. I've sneaked a cutting home of one of my favorite, I don't know, maybe I was admiring the hibiscus or the oleander, That's really harmless, right? Yeah.
Hold on a minute. This is called Michael's confession. This is like he's come into the confession box. He's letting it all out, and he's hoping, Dario, that you are going to be able to, like, I don't know, relieve him of his, I don't know, antics or whatever.
Yeah, what's going on, Michael? What have you been doing? What did you do at the weekend?
Is that, theoretically, is that harmless?
Theoretically, is it harmless? Well, the answer is no. I mean, I have to admit these things. My family members, they're awful at doing plant swaps, and there's been plants moved between countries. And I have to. This stuff happens. This is the reality of life. Yeah. But it's not a great thing to do, and I do tell my family off when I've heard about it, because there are various problems. I mean, let's say, for example, I want to know where you've been, where you picked up the oleander from. So if it was from southern Italy, I'd be very angry with you. Because there are
theoretical.
All right. There are places where there are significant outbreaks of really significant disease. And we, look, and, again, I'm going to refer back to Xylella because I keep talking about this all the time, obviously. But I mean, look, you go on holiday to southern Italy, it's beautiful. Or you're like, I like that plant over there. Well, I just take a cutting and I can probably try and root that back in the UK. Well, yeah, you can probably, and it probably would grow. The problem is you don't know what's going on with that plant. You have no idea from looking at it. A plant can look healthy. It can look physically beautiful and healthy. There can be latent infections. So infections inside which are not apparent. It might take a few years, or in many instances, you move it to a place where it gets a bit stressed, and that infection, which it probably was dealing with, where it was nice and happy and healthy, suddenly becomes a problem. And then suddenly, you've got something in your garden looking very odd, and you don't know what to do with it. And then maybe it gets put on a compost heap and it gets spread that way. There's so many different pathways once it's here for it to then move. And I'm talking about a pathogen here, for example, not necessarily a pest or an insect. But look, at the end of the day, we have Asian hornets now across Europe and in the southern part of the UK now, because one hitchhiked a lift on a pallet of pots, terracotta pots from China.
Yeah.
So, there's also been, reports of, and it sounds hilarious, but Asian hornets jumping onto a caravan, which is going to be going to Calais, then getting on a ferry. And then once it gets here, off the Queen goes, and that's, that's that. So it's difficult, very difficult to kind of, I suppose, enforce with too much aggression, because I totally get it. Like plants, I go away on holiday to look at plants. I mean, that's what I do.
Yeah.
The temptation is there. But then again,
but then some countries like Australia, for example, they're very strict, and that is like
absolutely
that is quite known that way. But they obviously started that many years ago. That is quite ingrained into the culture, isn't it? So
it is. Yeah, they take your chewing gum, don't they? I think, if I remember.
Yeah. So quite a few years ago, I went to Sydney with my husband, who took his bike, and it was in a big bike box, and he spent I don't even know how long packing it, and with a toothbrush cleaning the pedals, all the tires. And when we got there, they did check it. They checked every single little tiny bit of it for there wasn't allowed to be any soil or dirt or anything at all.
It's amazing that it's incredible that they actually do that. And it kind of blows your mind a bit, doesn't it? But but you see, at the end of the day, that 1 little gram of soil could have nematodes in it. You don't know. It is a risk. It is a risk. And that's why I say to you, Michael, stop bringing stuff back from holiday. And just
Michael, you brought it to the confession box, so you have to expect the answer.
Everyone on me now.
Just don't do it. Just don't do it.
Honestly, Dario, that's been really, really interesting information. I'm kind of a bit to be honest.
100%.
I could talk about it even more, but we can't. We have to end the podcast, or I get itchy because I feel like it might go on too long. And Michael
she
always
worries
takes
about the
the mickey.
time and blah, blah, blah.
I loved it. Thank you so much for spending the time with us, Dario. Where can people find out more about you and what you do online?
Where can you find out about me? I am supposed to be on the RHS Plant Health Team website, but I think the profiles are taking ages to update.
Okay.
But you could look at, if you do a Google of Plant Health, RHS Science and Collections, you might find me knocking around on there. You could do a general Google. You could probably do on LinkedIn if you want to have a look. I do have an Instagram account, but I don't use it very often. It's called London Planting. I mean, should I promote that? I don't know.
Why not?
There's always various random. It's basically me being on holiday on that Instagram account.
Yeah, okay. That's a good reason to follow. Yeah.
Oh yeah, being on holiday and not bringing back cuttings. That's
There's no plant collect. I do go up to Scotland quite a bit, and I love looking at the wild flowers and stuff. But I leave them there. I don't bring them back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much, Dario. It's much appreciated. I think that's definitely will give listeners a lot of things to think about and to look out for.
Yeah, really useful.
I've tried to explain in, I suppose, the most simplest way. There's a lot of language which can get quite confusing with this. There's a lot of abbreviations and acronyms. So I've tried to keep away from that to try and keep it nice and clear. So
I think you've done really well. Yeah.
Thought it was perfect. Thank you very much.
Good.
You literally just stayed without the Zoom on mute while I went to the toilet, Ellen, and I was still chatting to you as I peed. It was very liberating. I really surprised you stood for it, to be honest. I thought you'd be like, oh no, go away.
I didn't really think anything of it, but if you do need to pee in the middle of a podcast, then obviously I put you on mute then.
I've been hydrating heavily today, Ellen Mary.
Well, that's a good thing, Michael Perry, isn't it? Oh, you've been a busy bee these last few days. You've been away doing stuff, haven't you?
Where have I? Yeah, I have. Do you know what? It's been such a busy couple of weeks. It's hard to then, I don't know what people must think when I then, well, hang on, what am I saying? I'm stretching this sentence really crazily. When people ask me, I arrived at the National Plant Show for judging, not yesterday, day before, and Dean was like, oh, what have you been up to? And I was like, momentarily, I've been away in Holland and then in Birmingham, and I was like, I couldn't remember what I'd been doing. It's just like...
I think that's normal when you go from one place to another really quickly, and you quickly move on to the next thing because you have to get out of one brain space.
But he must have thought I was so dumb that I couldn't remember where I'd been.
I do that all the time. That means
honestly, it was such a mind blank for that moment. Look.
What is the blue flower?
Yeah, I got sent it by the Alzheimer's Society. Isn't that cool? It's a forget-me-not. You can just pin to yourself.
Michael, you do realise you just said that you couldn't remember where you had been.
Oh, that was the segue of dreams, wasn't it?
That was. My gosh.
But the thing is, I'm really bad at these things because I always forget to take them off and then I end up washing it in it. Oh, Ellen, are you good at emptying pockets?
I am. I empty pockets, but oh my gosh, I get so annoyed when my husband puts his clothes in the washing machine with tissues in the pocket. That is the most annoying thing ever.
But I find I'm always leaving everything in pockets, I'm talking mostly coat pockets, but because I wear a lot of different jackets and coats, because I'm thinking about style, it's often I'm then what pocket are my AirPods in now? Do you know what I mean? It's like some bingo game.
I empty my pockets as soon as I get home.
Oh, you're too square for me.
Well, yeah, but otherwise you come into the problems like you were just describing. So.
I know, but how are you getting on with more travel? You must be losing things momentarily sometimes.
Yeah, that is so funny. You just said that today. I'm currently in an apartment hotel, and I have literally created carnage in this apartment. There is stuff everywhere, and I looked. And I thought maybe this is going to be the first time I lose something. So far this year, I haven't lost anything. But it's weird you would say that. because I was genuinely like, there is stuff everywhere. How am I going to remember what?
Well, I'm always setting myself reminders. I've always got pillow and charger is my reminder in the morning when I'm in a hotel to always remember that, because like, I don't know, it's horrible to forget things. And like, it could, if it's AirPods or something, it could be expensive. So yeah, anything key that I need to remember. But also, I'm going on holiday on Monday, and like in my head, I keep thinking of things that I need and things that I want to take. So I kind of got this like running list that I've then got in my reminders, which is like built up from passport all the way through to I do that. Oil now. It's like, oh my God, I must take this, must take that.
I do the same thing.
I pack off the reminders list almost. Yeah,
I do that. That's good though. That's good organization. And when you're on the move a lot, you kind of do have to be a bit organized.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, you've got to be agile and like know what to remind yourself of when. And we often talk about this, reminding yourself to take your bag off the train, things like that. Yeah. It's really silly, but it's like you don't want to drop a clanger, you know. Because when you're traveling, like, your mind can be in a different place sometimes, you know.
Often, even when you're not traveling.
Oh, Ellen, are you sitting there today wondering what that houseplant is behind me?
Hey, Michael, I was wondering, what is that houseplant sitting behind you?
What do you reckon it is, Ellen Mary?
What
would you guess that crazy houseplant is?
I reckon that is an orchid.
An orchid? No, not the pink thing. The lines.
The pink thing isn't an orchid. Yeah, the lines. They look like orchid stems with the nodes on. Yeah, from here. Oh, I can't see up there.
That'd be a pretty giant orchid.
Now we're higher up. It's huge. Oh, that's really tall. It's not. What is it?
It's an equisetum, you know, like the horsetail.
With the horsetail, like that's what the stems look. Yes, I can see that now. But you can see, like, I could only see a square of it, and you know, stems of orchid are green and then a node, and then green and then a node. That's what the horsetail stem looks like.
It's a pond.
Yeah, that's very cool.
You're supposed to be a little bit more impressed, at least 10%.
I just said it's really cool.
But my water lily is so not deep enough. I don't know what's going to happen there. But yeah, it's cool. I've got little floaters in here, Ellen. There's everything. But the duckweed has already taken over.
Will you get mosquitoes?
No, where would they come from?
Well, they'll come in, won't they? Like on or in.
They're going to find me 10 floors up in Brentford, are they? Oh,
yeah, they definitely can find you anywhere. Nature can find you anywhere.
Really? Oh.
Yeah, of course.
My oxygenator has grown. Do you know what, though? When I first set it up, it was covered in algae, but it has, like, assimilated itself. That's the wrong word. But the ecosystem has sorted itself out, and now it's as clear as a daisy.
Oh, look, it is. It looks really cool.
Yeah, totally. Oh, brilliant. Oh, well, it's lovely to see you, Ellen. It's nice that we're in the same time zone, albeit you're in Norwich, which is always slightly behind.
Oh, my gosh. We're still going there. We're still going there.
In other news, what do we think of hydrangea houseplants?
I think that's wonderful.
Oh, okay. That's nice. I bought back some houseplants from Holland. I was like too excited because, oh my God, the prices are so good there. It's like 2 of these hydrangeas for €5. It's just amazing.
Can I ask if you've had some coffee today?
No, why?
Oh, because you're really very busy.
I'm very busy. I've been trying not to have too much, Ellen Mary, but I'm really gagging for my holiday, honestly. You know, I'm bottlenecking this week a bit. There's like so many different things I need to produce and write articles. Like, you write a lot of articles. How do you get through that?
I write most days all day, and sometimes it drives me completely potty. Mostly, like most of my work outside of this stuff, media stuff, is copywriting for horticultural companies. And
you don't
I do hours and hours a day, and it does drive me balmy, which is why I get outside as much as possible. Otherwise, I just be sitting looking at a screen.
I'm really bad at disciplining myself. It's like if I don't feel it's coming, I can't even try and make it come.
Oh, I hit deadline.
Of course, yeah.
Deadlines get hit on the second of the deadline. Like,
you have to make
you won't get anything at like days before. Like, if you give me a deadline, you'll get it on the deadline. Like, I do work that pressure.
efficient, actually, because it would be silly to use your time before you need to use it, if you know what I mean. So I think meeting a deadline is the most efficient way to live a life.
I think it depends on how you prioritize stuff, really. But to me, you know, if the sun is shining and I've got a deadline at 4:00, I don't do the work in the morning. I'll go to the allotment in the morning. I'll do all my other things, and then I'll start writing at 3:00 or whatever. So, yeah. And, you know, now the sun is out, all I want to do is be outside, not sitting in writing. So.
The bliss of being a freelancer.
Yeah.
We just recorded some podcasts today, and I sent Ella Mary a picture of myself at 1:45, ready for the podcast, and I was shirtless with a cap on, just like that, because, you know, summer freelancing.
Yeah, sure. I was like, no, thank you.
You need to remember this thing, to be off in August, because I always make the mistake of thinking I can do work in August, but you kind of get to this point where nobody else is really around in August. So actually, you kind of can't really get on with projects because the people you need are not there. So, I always get to August and think, that'd be nice to catch up. And then I'm like, nah, don't want to.
August is quiet mentally and some work coming in. Do you know what I mean? Like the main garden shows, April to June, July are kind of done. You really get August off. And I'm with you. I have a massive list. And I'm like, I'll tick them all off in August. That never happens. You just totally in September, don't you? It's funny really how that works, but we know it. But every year we still say it. Every year. Yeah,
defo. I know, but this year I will. So I don't know. But
where are you going on holiday?
Barcelona. Yeah, I'm very excited. I think because ever since kind of like bringing myself back up to speed, it's just then. There's been so many things to do, and I'm kind of like more aware than ever of kind of like having periods of rest and stuff. And so I feel like I need the proper recharge kind of feeling as well. So, so trying to get to that, finish everything off. But it's still like my diary gets so full because everything's so enjoyable. That's the thing.
I know you don't want to say no when it's something.
Guns World Live was lovely. National Plant Show. I filmed with Cherry Lane on Monday as well. Yeah, and it just like, I don't know, things tend to just slot in here and there. I don't know. Yeah.
As long as like in between those busy things, you're just taking a little bit.
I guess it's always harder because I do naturally work weekends. So you then end up, if you are then doing something on a weekday, you've got no natural division of a weekend because every day is a day, if you know what I mean. So
I find the same when I'm on my own, but when I'm in the US with my husband, weekends are like off. Like because he obviously works in an office Monday to Friday, so it's a more defined time, and I actually find that difficult because sometimes my mind's in the right place at the weekend, and I'm like, no, I want to write, but I kind of can't.
Yeah, because I did that like this morning. I knew I needed to get on with a load of work, and I know we've talked about this many times. You try and then force yourself to do it because you have to, but you sometimes need to go with what naturally feels right at that time. Yeah. And so I just kind of dillied into like Chiswick and got a coffee and stuff, and like was aware I needed to work. But then I was like, okay, I'll set myself 12 noon that I will then start working. And so like I was back here just before 11. So this is a lot of detail, Ellen. It
really is.
Not just this level of detail from me. Sorry, but I've changed. And so then I was like on the balcony, kind of sunbathing. I only get the sun until about 11:50 here, so I was making the most of it. Yeah, I was literally like, my body was still in the sun because obviously I was still shirtless at this point. My body was still in the sun, but my head wasn't at that point. And then I got to like, I don't know, 11:30. And even though I was ready to work at 12, that was the time I was going to work. I was kind of 11:30. I kind of like had this sudden like, I suddenly got some beans in my juicer. I don't know what that means. And I was ready to work. And so I was actually ahead of my own deadline to work.
I mean, just for our listeners, I think we should
felt right.
We should just reiterate that this is a plant-based podcast and we do generally talk about plants, but sometimes our gossip...
I know you have to apologize, you're so cute.
Some kind of therapeutic session where we talk about all other things.
It's our podcast. If we want to talk about salmon, we can. Because actually, I want to tell you about salmon. No. Oh, I love how you have to apologise for that.
I didn't apologise. I was reiterating, not apologising. That's
We got
two different
6
things.
minutes. We got 6 minutes left before we got a very highbrow interview. There are maybe more things we want to discuss that I will leave to you, but I do want to discuss your hair because I really like this pulled back look. You look like a ballerina.
Oh, cool.
Walk us through your hair today, Ellen Mary, because it's leaving a bun there. Look
I
at that.
pulled it back into a bun, and then it's
You look
very
Swan Lake.
it's very slick, and I like it because you can see all the bright white stripes in it. But also because I haven't washed it, that's the best thing to do with it.
Oh, I think it looks really nice, actually.
Thank you. And if you pull it really tight, it pulls a bit of your facial skin up, so you look younger.
Is that true?
I think you'd have to have it much tighter than mine.
Oh, right.
Probably, yeah. If you pulled
That's
it
what
really,
girls
really
do. Now
tight,
I understand why girls have buns.
no, but look, if you pull it really tight, you can see the difference. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for the compliment. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so we've got 6 minutes. I might need to factor in another wee that you listen to.
Okay, so that means we've got
How are we
3
gonna get through?
minutes. We've got 3 minutes to finish up.
Is there anything you want to tell us about plants, Ella Mary?
Do I want to tell you anything
Because I know
about
it's on your mind.
the only so there's a whole load of stuff going on online, obviously, about slugs and snails this year because it's been super wet, and I've been like, can I just tell everyone that because we can see each other on video, Michael's literally pulling faces at me like. You say you haven't had any coffee, but I feel like if you've not had coffee, you've had alcohol.
I've now deemed it interesting enough to film.
You are wired. Oh, he even filmed it, I see. Anyway,
Yeah, carry on.
slugs and snails have been a massive big problem for everything. But on my allotment, they've not been too bad,
boring.
but they have been more than usual. So some things got eaten, some things are amazingly vibrant. But the one thing I always say, I won't sow many of, I won't grow many of. I don't really like them that much. So I just grow a couple of tomato plants. And I sowed a lot of seeds and then I left them in my mum's greenhouse because I'd gone away. And I've been away like BBC Gardens World, Malvern, all the things over the last couple of months. And I went to her greenhouse assuming that the big tomato plants with big tomatoes already formed were hers.
Yeah.
She was like, oh no, these are all yours.
Oh.
I don't even like tomatoes that much. And so I had to come home with a car full of tomatoes.
Oh, really? I'm all over tomatoes now, Ellen Mary. I'll eat them
well, you
fresh,
can have some of
everything.
these. You can have some of these.
Honestly.
I love the fact
Look at
that
them.
Michael said to me, you can talk about plants. So I talked a little bit about plants and he's clearly bored.
No, I'm not bored. I was listening. Honestly, just because I'm not butting in doesn't mean I'm not listening.
You're not even looking at the screen, you're looking at your phone.
Nobody looks at the screen on Zoom, Ellen.
Everybody looks at the screen bar you
Keep
when
looking at
you're
that
not in.
pinhole all the time, am I? That would be weird.
I'm done with you now.
Let's look at the pinhole. All right, well, I've got 3 minutes to pee. If you don't want to hear it, then I suggest you sign off, and then I'll see you again for our highbrow interview.
All right, then. I don't know. Okay, great. Yeah. I don't know if I can do highbrow today, but sure.
You can with that hair.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Oh, you look like, I don't know, like better value Sophie Ellis Webster. Webster. Baxter? Sophie Ellis Baxter. Yeah, that's right. God. I don't know what happened. I think I had one of these cold Earl Greys. That's the thing.
I don't know what's going on here, but I'm signing off now before
I don't know, but it's amazing value. I'll see you in a minute, babe. Ciao, Bonga.
The tranquil, soothing, natural sound of flowing water. Listening to it has been shown to lower your heart rate and blood pressure and gently relax your whole body. Combining the magical sound of cascading water with the beauty of plants, Hydria Life now enable you to enjoy these same health and well-being benefits at home or in the garden. Get 10% off their rechargeable Hydria fountain at hydrialife.com when you quote code PLANT24 on ordering. That's PLANT24 on ordering.
The music for the Plant-Based podcast is part of the song Grow by Mikey James, and our editor is Gareth Patch of Semi Echo.